Welcome to another episode of AWS She Builds Tech Skills. My name is Tamara Gagliardi, and I will be one of your hosts for today. We have a very special episode. Today, we will be talking to a few participants of the AWS Early Career Program. This is a program that focuses on those looking to advance their career in technology. If you're a recent graduate from an undergraduate or graduate degree, this will be the episode for you. We'll be talking about what it means to be part of this program, what skills do you get to develop at AWS. We really look to invest in developing both your technical and business skills. So if you're looking to understand more of how to become AWS Solutions Architect, this will be the episode that will give you behind the scene on how to apply for the program, what the program entails. And as part of the program, you also get to build a project. So you get hands-on experience on building with AWS technology. And we'll have a demo on what the project looked like and what was the development process to achieve this end use case. We'll be talking to a few of the participants. I will be bringing them on board to today's session. As I do so, I will be asking each of you to please introduce yourself. Welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have all of you joining us today. Would like you to introduce yourself and maybe share which college did you attend in?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Aisha. I'm a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services, that's AWS. I attended college actually in Germany. So I went to the University of Bonn in Germany. I did my master's in computer science there. I graduated in October and then joined AWS in November.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy. I'm a solutions architect here with AWS. I recently graduated the TechU program. I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, and graduated with a degree in network and digital technology last spring.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sabrina Burka. I'm also a solutions architect at AWS. I went to the University of Washington, and I studied informatics with a concentration in data science.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shruti. I did my master's in information systems from Northeastern University and then joined AWS as a solutions architect in November 24.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I mentioned earlier we will get to learn how did you all got into the AWS Early Career Program. Internally, we know it as TechU. So if throughout the session we mentioned that wording, it refers to the program itself. But maybe, Shruti, if you can share with the audience, if they're looking to follow your same steps, how did you even get this opportunity?
Yeah, sure. So after completing my master's in information systems, I was really looking at graduate programs, and that's where I found TechU's graduate program on Amazon's career page, which is the earlier career page I found the link to. Yeah. And having a background in computer science, what really motivated me to apply for this role is my interest in system designing, and this role gave me an opportunity to also face customers and design systems for them. So yeah, that was my motivation behind applying for this role.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll pop in my screen just to walk you through. I'm guessing if you go to the Amazon job page, under jobs for recent graduates, if you click that, it will take you to the recent graduates program page, where if you even scroll a little further down, you might find the associate roles associated with this program. So if you see an associate solutions architect role and you apply for it, you will be a candidate possibly for one of these programs. And then I know that there are different paths that other participants took. Sabrina, if you walk us through, how was it that you ended up with this opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually ended up hearing about this role through a friend who also works in AWS sales. He is a partner development representative, and he knew of the solutions architect role because he works with SAs in his job. And so he actually recommended that I apply for the role. So he referred me. I was able to get an interview, and I'm here today. So that was my path.
We're very happy to have you. Referrals go a very long way at AWS. Christy, I know you also came through a referral, but it was a different story on your end.
Yes, that's correct. So I met the solutions architect at my university when he was doing a workshop on relational databases. And then I connected with him on LinkedIn, and he told me about the solutions architect role and sent me a referral.
So also, if you don't have an internal contact, maybe reaching out through somebody through LinkedIn might be another avenue. And just wanted to get maybe a first insight into the program and what was maybe your experience, Aisha, going through this early career program. Any highlights, anything that caught you by surprise?
Yeah, so my experience with TechU has been incredibly positive. A major highlight that I would say for me was the incredible support system that comes with being a part of the TechU program. So we were part of a cohort, which means that you're learning alongside others. But what really surprised me was just how extensive the support network is beyond like your immediate team. The highlight that I would like to share also ties into this. So I once reached out to a senior solutions architect just via normal messaging to ask about his journey about being a solutions architect at Amazon. What caught me by surprise was not only did he respond, but he was genuinely enthusiastic in learning more about me as well as sharing his experience. This kind of showed that it was very easy to access senior leadership, and you weren't like afraid to go and ask. You can just ask anytime, and everybody was there to support you. So that was the best part of being in this program.
We'll be walking through what that experience is more in detail, and as I mentioned, we'll have a demo coming up. But you touched base on a couple of items on the program itself. So as we mentioned, it's an early career program. You do have this cohorts that are aligned. You're all part of this cohort. And within that too, you have a capstone project, which is a project where you get to build a solution. That solution gives you opportunity into building hands-on experience with AWS services. And we also look back at to what is the business driver, like why are we even building the solution? So when your cohort was looking for ideas on what type of solutions to build, I work within AWS as a solutions architect supporting healthcare and life sciences customers. These are customers that might have a number of different needs, and within that there's a number of diagnostic customers. These are customers that have labs. You can think of these labs of any type of test, from like urine tests or blood tests. And we were seeing that a lot of those customers needed visibility into the operations that were happening within their labs. Maybe they're looking to scale, and if you have limited physical space, and you want to scale your operations, have an insight into how your labs are operating, it's crucial. So I remember going into the kickoff to that capstone project and pitching this idea. And luckily for me, all you ladies were interested in working on this. So we'll be highlighting that throughout today's session. But now that we understand maybe a little bit about that business need, let's walk through what, at a high level, this diagnostic lab workflow looks like.
Yeah, I can quickly walk you through how we simulated lab operations. So, for instance, let's take a blood sample entering a lab in Boston. That blood sample is mapped for a CBC type of test, which is a complete blood count test. This test is being attended by a lab technician. So the lab technician processes the sample in a batch of samples. These sample batches have to undergo standard operations of procedure. These standard operations of procedures are nothing but steps predefined as per the compliance and regulations of these laboratories. Each step has been mapped to a lab instrument, and these sample batch are processed in these lab instruments. Lab instruments also have to be maintained to meet compliance. Experiments on these tests are performed on the instruments, which require reagents. And experiments also have to be monitored with extensive quality control. Later, the lab technicians will examine the final results of the experiment and make sure that the results have been processed properly. So this is kind of what we try to simulate in our project. The goal of the project was to provide operational visibility through what activities are performed in the laboratory. And yeah, so that was the overall walkthrough of the entire lab operations operations.
Thank you, Shruti. And one thing I do want to highlight is that I remember when I first reached out to all of you, there was very little understanding in terms of healthcare and life sciences, functionality, or even diagnostics. So she just walked you through an entire end-to-end workflow that was something that I know the team invested a lot of time as part of this project to understand itself, diagnostic, understand the business. So that's another thing I want to highlight out of this team. It put a lot of hours and efforts into understanding the business, and that's also something as part of the program that you'll get to do, and as part of a solutions architect too, that you get to dive deep into the business that you're supporting. With that too, we just walked through that high-level overview of what the end-to-end process looks like. We also narrowed down this solution for 3 personas. Maybe, Christy, if you can walk us through what those 3 personas are and what to expect.
Yes, I can walk us through that. So we first designed our solutions for 3 personas: a lab technician, a lab manager, and a VP of lab operations. So the lab technician will be responsible for running the experiments correctly and accurately. So they would be looking at more detailed information such as how many experiments were run, how many experiments need to be rerun, and how many experiments were done correctly. Next, the lab managers, they're responsible for ensuring efficient workflow within the lab. So they would be looking at operational and inventory information, such as how many reagents do we have, how much inventory do we have. We have the VP of lab operations, so they're responsible for overseeing all of the labs and making sure all labs are running properly and smoothly. So they'd be looking at information such as how many tests are being run over all of the location, what variety of tests are being run, and what changes and improvements need to be made.
Excellent. Thank you, Christy, for walking us through that. Now we understand the business pain point. We understand who is interested in even consuming the data that we'll be showing. And I think we all love to see visuals and actually jump into the demo. So we prepare a demo today to share with you, the audience, on how we're stitching this whole story together and the end product. Maybe Aisha, if you want to jump into that, I'll be sharing the screen right now. I'll be popping it up.
Sure. So let's get into the demo. The solution is built on a scenario wherein we have labs in 4 locations. That's Austin, Boston, LA, and Chicago. And we have 3 types of samples that come into the lab. These are blood samples, tissue samples, and they could be urine samples. As Shruti had mentioned, all of these samples go through standard operating procedure. These are like the set of steps that each sample has to go through in order to be processed. And they're treated with reagents and go through a set of instruments to finally finish their processing. So we designed this demo with giving visibility to 3 personas. That's the VP of Lab Operations. So starting with the VP of Lab Operations. As the VP of Lab Operation, I would be interested in high-level strategic information across all of my labs. So with this view, I can now see that 1993 experiments were conducted across all of my labs, all of the 4 labs. I can also see the samples completed versus reported. So for example, I can see that on this date, that's April 12th, the completed samples were 25, whereas only 19 of them were reported. I can then investigate or tell my lab manager to look at it and see why those 6 samples that completed processing were not reported. So this gives visibility across all of my labs. Next, we also designed a dashboard for the lab manager. As the lab manager, I want to oversee the operations within my lab, and I want to ensure that the operations are conducted seamlessly. So one type of visual that I would like to see is the error rate. So how many of my samples are failing and what are the reasons for it? So I can see now with the help of this view that 24% of the samples that are being processed in the lab are failing due to calibration error. I can then further investigate and maybe speed up the process of sample processing. I can also see as these samples that come into the lab also go through instruments. Another view that's helpful for me is the instrument runtime overview. With this, I can see that an instrument of type blood analyzer, 50% of the instruments are in downtime. So this view helps me in better allocating my instruments for the samples that are coming in. We also integrated a feature with an AWS service that's called Q. So that helps just ask a simple question in plain natural language and you get the answer quickly. Say you don't have time to like go through all of these reports. You can quickly ask how many experiments failed. And with just a quick search, you see that 483 of these experiments have failed. So this gives quick visibility and gets the lab manager to act quickly. We also design as a lab manager, I also want to see my technicians that are working within the lab. Say I'm a lab manager who's working in Boston. I can see that 128 of my technicians are working in the morning shift and 125 are in the afternoon shift. This helps the lab manager to better allocate their resources. Another view that we designed was for the lab technician. As the lab technician, I want to have granular level information on all of my samples that are coming in the lab. So with this view, I can see that some samples that are failing are requiring to be rerun, and those are 279. So I can quickly see that 577 samples passed, 153 were to be retaken, and 279 have to be rerun. As a lab technician, another important view for me is where a sample currently is, which step is it in, and what's the next step that's going to be run for it. For example, let me quickly search where is sample 12. I can see that sample 12 is on step number 9 and it has successfully completed the test and the test is complete. Another example is, for example, if I quickly search where's sample 26. So as a lab technician, I can see that it failed at step number 8 and now the next step is to rerun step number 8. I can also see what's the next instruction. So this gives all of the information that I need under one dashboard and gives me very easy visibility. I can also quickly just search where is sample 6. And with a quick search, I can see that it's at step number 21. So this kind of gives high-level visibility for the VP of lab operations, for the lab manager, and it gives granular level information for the lab technician to better process their samples and process them faster in order to get results soon. So this concludes our demo.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Aisha. Very detailed, covered all the different personas, and really empowers from the VP to the technician, that feature of like being able to search a specific sample and know what's the next step. I know it's something that a lot of our customers were wanting to have insight on. So thank you, very powerful. I know also a solutions architect, we're driven by technology, by architecture. I mean, in our title, architecture is part of it. So I'm sure our audience is curious on how was this possible? How did you build this? Maybe Shruti, if you want to walk us through the architecture from the solution.
Yeah, sure. So let me quickly walk you through how this solution was built. We have on-premise instruments and data coming in from the laboratories. Once we connect that data with the cloud, we will store that information, that structured and unstructured data, into S3 data lake. You might ask what S3 is. It is an AWS service which you use to store all kinds of data. Then, to transform that data, we used another AWS service called Glue. It is an extract, transform, and loading service which will help you structure the data in the format that you want. Once you transform that data, we are storing that data into Amazon Redshift. What is Amazon Redshift? Amazon Redshift is a data warehouse which stores structural information. So all the data that you saw on the dashboard was structured in tables and stored in a particular way in the Redshift. Finally, we are connecting our data warehouse solution to a BI solution, which is Amazon QuickSight. Amazon QuickSight helped us build those amazing dashboards that you saw in the previous demo. And with the help of Amazon QuickSight Q, the lab personas can quickly use natural language to tap into the information which is present on the dashboard. So this was the overall AWS architecture view of the project that we just built.
Thanks for walking me through that. And I know from ideation to what we just showed you, the demo and architecture, there were a lot of steps in between. And that's also part of this Capstone project. So curious, Christy, if you can walk the audience, and how did you go through that process? What did that look like?
So first, to get started, we had to understand the requirements and the goals of our project. And once we did that, we did some research on how lab operates, because none of us have a background in how lab operates. So we went weeks digging in and all of the data that they collect, all of the things that we need to see. And then once we got the data that we need to collect and understood them, we developed an entity relationship diagram. So we did an entity relationship diagram to define the relationships between the data. This is a very crucial step because this connects the data together and displays on the dashboard. Once we decided our entity relationship, we then used AI services such as Mockery to generate synthetic data, since we don't have access to the lab operations. Once we generated our synthetic data, we designed and implemented our architecture. We dove into the console to build the architectural pieces. Then we connected it to the dashboard to show the insight and analytical information of our data.
There were a lot of steps that it took to get to that amazing demo that we just saw. Along the path, probably there were a lot of challenges or areas that caught you by surprise. Curious, Sabrina, on your insight on this piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the steps that was the most challenging and involved for us were designing the data model, so the ERD, as well as generating the synthetic data. So in order to model all of this lab data in a dashboard, we had to model real-world entities such as people, places, and things in the form of tables. So in order to do this, we first had to identify all of the entities that need to be present in the dashboard. So everything that you see on this slide somehow shows up in our dashboard. So for instance, location. For our purposes, we decided to have 4 different locations: LA, Austin, Chicago, and Boston. And like Aisha mentioned, as a VP of lab operations, you may want to be able to see data across the different locations. So we needed a table for this. You'll notice that all of these different entities are also connected somehow by arrows. And these define the relationships between the entities. So an instrument, you'll see on the left side of the screen, is in a location. And that means that there is a dependency of the instrument on the location table. So it doesn't make sense for an instrument to be in multiple locations, but every instrument is going to be associated to a specific location. And that will allow us to create the visualizations that you saw, where you can actually track which sample is in which location and in which instrument. So I think we can go into the entity relationship diagram. So I know this might look like a lot, but this is actually the same thing that was on the last slide. So every single entity in the last picture is now modeled as a table here. And you'll notice that every single table has a number of rows, and these are the attributes of the table. So each line here is actually a column in our data warehouse. So every single table has a unique ID, which is going to identify that specific row or data entry in the table. So when Aisha searched in the dashboard, where is sample 6 or where is sample 21, that's actually connecting to the sample ID in the backend and pulling info about that sample. So there are also, you'll notice, are some rows that are highlighted in red. Those are called foreign keys. And all that is a reference to the primary key or the unique ID of a different table. So like how I mentioned, an instrument table on the far left there is going to be in the location table. And the way that that relationship is formed is that there's actually a data entry in the instrument table that connects it to the ID of a specific location, thereby forming the relationship. Now, the reason that we did this is because, as Shruti mentioned, we chose to use Amazon Redshift, which is a data warehouse. And data warehouses are super optimized for analytical workloads, like the one that we were doing with a dashboard and visualizations. But the trade-off is that they have a very rigid schema, which basically means you need to identify all the tables and all the data that will be present before you build and put data in there. Unlike, for instance, the data lake, which Shruti mentioned, which can just have any kind of data. You don't have to determine where it goes beforehand.
Excellent. Yeah, data was at the core of this project, from creating that synthetic data, understanding even what are some of those entities you walked us through. You needed instrument data, you needed location data, you needed even what type of samples, or we talked about SOPs, what type of tests. So I know that the team invested a lot of time then translating all your learnings into what that data would look like, and then creating this data model. We walked through the entirety of the project itself. What's next? You graduated. Congratulations for your graduation. What's the next step after you graduate? What does that look like?
We are currently in residency, which comes after graduating TechU. So when in TechU, we were equipped with the necessary technical knowledge through doing modules, certifications, and also this capstone project. After this, now with residency, we get more hands-on and get prepared to speak to actual customers and address their concerns the right way. So we go through a process that's called Awesome Builder that simulates a real customer scenario, and we're going through these now. We just completed our first one. We have 2 more to go before we kind of complete the steps of completing Awesome Builder. There's also a phase where we select technical field communities that interests us. So there are several of them, ranging from security, databases, to now AI ML. I did my master's in computer science and I specialized in ML particularly. So my area would likely be artificial intelligence, machine learning, or even analytics. With this project that we did for the diagnostic companies, we used a lot of analytic workloads and services with AWS, and that really interests me. So that is kind of the path that we follow after TechU.
Sabrina, do you have an insight on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, like Aisha says, we can kind of specialize in a specific technical field community. After residency, we will move into a specific team. So we'll get assigned to real customers and start taking calls. And eventually we can move on to a separate team called the field, which is more down the line, and we can start dealing with more and bigger customers. So lots of exciting things coming up for sure.
I am very excited for all of you on your next step, your next journey. I remember me myself when I went through also Awesome Builder, those 3 stages really prepared you, again, doing full circle with those technical skills, those soft skills, those business skills. How do you even ask the right questions to then build the right solutions and identify the services that will align with what the customer is looking for. You build an amazing demo and a solution, so congrats on that as well. And with that, I guess we'll be closing today's session. Wanted to thank each of you for taking the time to share your story, share your insight on what was your experience within the program, and then for building such an amazing solution. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us, and thanks to the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time. Bye.